One quiet decision inside the palace has just changed everything. An inheritance no one expected has landed in the hands of Lady Louise. And behind the scenes, one family is said to be absolutely furious. The unexpected heir. Behind the polished gates and carefully managed appearances of the British royal family, a quiet shift has taken place, one so subtle that it almost slipped past public attention, yet powerful enough to reshape long-standing expectations within the monarchy. It did not arrive with ceremony or spectacle. There were no grand announcements, no formal declarations delivered from palace balconies, no carefully staged photographs designed to mark the occasion. Instead, it unfolded in the way the most significant royal decisions often do, quietly, deliberately, and far from the public eye. And at the center of this unexpected development stands Lady Louise Windsor. For years, Lady Louise has been one of the least controversial and most understated members of the royal family. The daughter of Prince Edward and Sophie, she has largely remained outside the intense spotlight that follows senior royals. While other members of the family have been the subject of headlines, speculation, and at times public scrutiny, Louise has quietly pursued her education and personal interests, maintaining a level of privacy that is increasingly rare within royal life. That is precisely why this moment feels so significant. Because recent reports suggest that a private estate, one closely associated with Queen Elizabeth II, has now been placed in her hands. Not temporarily assigned, not casually offered, but inherited in a way that signals intention and trust. And in the world of royal inheritance, nothing is ever without meaning. Every decision carries weight. Every transfer reflects not only personal relationships, but also a deeper understanding of legacy, loyalty, and long-term influence. The late Queen was known for her careful and measured approach to such matters. She did not act impulsively, especially when it came to family assets that had been preserved across generations, which raises a question that is now echoing quietly through royal circles. Why Lady Louise? To many observers, she may seem an unlikely choice. She is not a senior working royal. She does not occupy a central position in the line of succession. She has not spent years cultivating a public role in the way that others have. But to those who have followed her more closely, a different picture begins to emerge. Lady Louise represents something the monarchy has increasingly valued in recent years: stability, discretion, reliability. She has avoided controversy, maintained a respectful distance from public drama, and carried herself with a quiet sense of duty that does not demand attention. In a family where public perception can shift overnight, that kind of consistency becomes incredibly important. Some insiders believe that this decision reflects a deep level of trust, a recognition that Louise embodies qualities the late Queen valued above all else, not ambition or visibility, but steadiness and restraint. Others suggest that the reasoning may be more personal. It is no secret that Queen Elizabeth II shared a particularly warm relationship with her youngest grandchildren. Away from the pressures of official duties, those bonds were often built on genuine connection rather than public expectation. In that context, the decision to pass on a private estate to Lady Louise may represent something more emotional than strategic. A gesture of confidence, a quiet acknowledgement of character. But even that interpretation does not fully explain the impact this move is now having. Because within the royal family, inheritance is never just about the individual receiving it. It is about everyone else who did not. And that is where the situation begins to grow more complicated. For years, assumptions have existed about how royal assets would be distributed over time. Certain families, certain branches, and certain individuals were believed to have a natural proximity to these private estates. Access, even if informal, was often seen as part of their position within the broader royal structure. Now, those assumptions are being challenged, because this decision suggests that proximity alone is no longer enough. Instead, it points toward a shift in priorities. One that places greater emphasis on trust and discretion rather than expectation or entitlement. And that shift is not being received quietly by everyone involved. While Lady Louise's rise into this new position has been subtle, the reaction behind the scenes is said to be far more intense. Conversations are reportedly taking place within certain circles of the family. Questions are being asked about how this decision came to be and what it means for the future. Because if one unexpected choice can reshape access to a key estate, What might come next? That uncertainty is what makes this moment so significant. It is not just about a young royal inheriting property. It is about a signal, one that suggests the internal dynamics of the monarchy are evolving in ways that are not yet fully visible to the public. And for Lady Louise herself, the implications are profound. Her role within the family may never have been defined by status or attention. But this inheritance changes how she is positioned moving forward. It places her closer to the center of influence, whether she seeks that position or not. Because in the royal family, ownership brings responsibility. It shapes where people gather, where conversations happen, and where decisions begin to take form away from public scrutiny. Inheriting such a space means becoming part of that quiet network of influence. And that is not a small shift. It is the kind of change that does not make headlines immediately, but one that can alter relationships, expectations, and alignments over time. So, while the public may only be beginning to understand what has happened, those within royal circles already recognize the deeper meaning. A new figure has stepped, quietly but unmistakably, into a position of significance, and the ripple effects of that moment are only just beginning. The estate that changed to the power balance. To understand why this inheritance has stirred such quiet intensity behind palace walls, you have to look beyond the name of the person receiving it and focus instead on what has actually been passed down. Because this is not simply a matter of land or property. This estate, long associated with Queen Elizabeth II, represents something far more significant within the structure of the royal family. It is part of a private network of residences that exist outside the formal machinery of the monarchy. These are not properties tied to state duties or government oversight. They are deeply personal spaces, controlled by the monarch and used in ways that often shape relationships, alliances, and influence away from public scrutiny. For decades, estates like this have played a quiet but crucial role in how the royal family functions behind the scenes. They are where conversations happen without advisors present, where disagreements can be managed away from headlines, where trust is built not through ceremony but through proximity and access. In many ways, these private estates form the emotional and strategic backbone of the monarchy. And now, one of those spaces belongs to Lady Louise Windsor. That single shift has the potential to alter far more than most people realize. Because ownership in the royal family is never neutral. It creates a center of gravity. It determines who hosts, who visits, and who remains on the outside looking in. Those who control these environments often gain subtle authority, not through titles or official roles, but through the simple fact that they become the ones setting the stage. And for years, access to estates like this has been quietly shared among certain circles within the family. That access has never been formally defined, but it has been understood. Certain individuals were welcomed, included, and given the opportunity to move within these private spaces as part of their proximity to the monarch. Over time, that proximity translated into influence, into familiarity, and into a sense of belonging within the inner structure of royal life. Now, that structure appears to be shifting, because by placing this estate in Louise's hands, the balance of access has changed. Those who once moved freely within that space may now find themselves dependent on a new gatekeeper, not in a confrontational or dramatic way, but in the subtle, deeply felt manner that defines royal relationships. Invitations may change, gatherings may feel different. The tone of interaction may shift in ways that are difficult to articulate, but impossible to ignore. And that is where the real impact begins to unfold. The timing of this decision only adds to its significance. The royal family is already navigating a period of transformation. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II marked the end of an era defined by stability and continuity. In its place, a new structure is emerging, shaped by the priorities of King Charles III, and increasingly influenced by the future vision of Prince William. Within that context, every decision carries additional meaning. This inheritance does not exist in isolation. It fits into a broader pattern of recalibration, a quiet reassessment of who holds influence, who is trusted with responsibility, and who will play a role in the monarchy's future. And what makes this particular move so striking is that it does not follow the most obvious path. There were other individuals who, on paper, might have seemed more likely candidates. Those with higher public profiles, those more visibly integrated into the central workings of the royal institution. those whose positions might have suggested a natural claim to such an asset. But that is not what happened. Instead, the choice reflects a different set of priorities. It suggests that visibility is no longer the primary factor in determining influence. That public presence does not automatically translate into private authority, and that the monarchy, in its current phase, may be placing greater value on discretion, loyalty, and long-term reliability. For some, that shift feels reassuring. It signals a move towards stability and careful stewardship, a sense that the lessons of past challenges are being taken seriously, and that future decisions are being shaped with greater caution. But for others, it raises uncomfortable questions, because if long-standing assumptions about access and influence can be overturned so quietly, what does that mean for everyone else within the royal orbit? What other expectations might be reconsidered? What other positions might be reshaped without warning? These are the questions now circulating behind closed doors. Not publicly, not dramatically, but persistently. Because the monarchy has always operated on a delicate balance of tradition and adaptation. When that balance shifts, even slightly, it can create ripples that extend far beyond the initial decision. And that is exactly what appears to be happening now. Lady Louise may not have sought this level of attention or influence, but the estate she now holds places her in a position that cannot be ignored. It connects her to a network of private power that has long shaped the internal dynamics of the royal family. And as that connection becomes clearer, so too does the reality that this inheritance is not just a personal milestone. It is a signal, a quiet but unmistakable indication that the balance of power within the monarchy is evolving, and not everyone is certain where they stand in that new arrangement. Camilla's family reacts behind closed doors, while the public is only beginning to grasp the significance of this unexpected inheritance. Those closer to the inner workings of the royal family are already responding, and according to persistent whispers, the reaction from Queen Camilla's side has been anything but indifferent. Because for years, the family of Queen Camilla has occupied a delicate but meaningful position within the royal orbit. It was never formalized in titles or official duties, but it existed in practice: access to private estates, invitations to select gatherings, a quiet but consistent presence within spaces that were once closely tied to the personal life of Queen Elizabeth II. That access mattered, not only because of the comfort or prestige it offered, but because of what it represented. It signaled acceptance. It suggested that Camilla's family had, over time, been woven into the fabric of royal life, not as central figures, but as trusted extensions of someone who now sits beside the king. And for a while, that balance appeared stable. But this new development has unsettled that equilibrium in ways that are only now becoming clear. Because with the estate now in the hands of Lady Louise Windsor, the lines of access are no longer what they once were. What had previously been understood as an extension of Camilla's proximity to the late queen may now be subject to a completely different set of considerations. And that shift, according to insiders, has not gone unnoticed. Behind closed doors, conversations are said to be taking place, not in the form of open confrontation, but in the quieter, more controlled language that defines royal family dynamics. Questions are being asked about how this decision came to pass, about whether expectations were misunderstood, about what this means for future access to spaces that were once considered familiar. Because in a family governed as much by tradition as by perception, even subtle changes can feel significant. Some reports suggest that certain members of Camilla's family believed their connection would continue to provide a level of informal inclusion within the Queen's private world. Not ownership, not authority, but presence. The ability to remain part of that environment without needing to question their place within it. Now, that sense of certainty appears to have been disrupted. And disruption, especially when it involves long-standing assumptions, rarely sits comfortably. There is also a deeper layer to this reaction, one that goes beyond access and touches on something more symbolic. Because this inheritance does not just transfer property, it sends a message. It suggests that the late Queen's private legacy is being directed along a path that does not necessarily align with every branch of the extended royal family. It indicates that decisions about the future are being made with a particular vision in mind, one that prioritizes certain qualities over others. For Camilla's family, that realization may carry a quiet sting, not because they expected to inherit such an estate themselves, but because the shift signals a narrowing of influence, a subtle repositioning within the broader structure of royal relationships. And in an environment where proximity often translates into relevance, even a small adjustment can feel like a significant step back. At the same time, there is an awareness that reacting too strongly would only draw attention to what is, at least publicly, an entirely private matter. So, the response remains measured, carefully contained, expressed through private conversations rather than public statements, reflected in tone rather than action. But that does not mean the tension is not there, because within the royal family, emotions are rarely displayed openly, but they are felt deeply, and when expectations shift without warning, those emotions have a way of lingering beneath the surface. There is also the question of what comes next. If one estate can be reassigned in a way that alters established patterns of access, what does that mean for other properties, other traditions, other assumptions that have quietly shaped the experience of those connected to the monarchy? That uncertainty is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all, because it introduces the possibility that this is not an isolated decision, but part of a broader recalibration that is still unfolding. For now, nothing has been publicly confirmed beyond the inheritance itself. There have been no official statements addressing the internal reactions, no acknowledgement of tension, no visible signs of disagreement. But within the private spaces where these relationships are managed, the atmosphere is said to have shifted. Not dramatically, not irreversibly, but enough to be noticed. Because in the royal family, the most important changes are rarely the ones announced to the world. They are the ones that happen quietly, shaping perceptions, redefining roles, and altering the balance of influence one decision at a time. And for Queen Camilla's family, this may be one of those moments, a point where the familiar begins to feel uncertain and where the future, once assumed, now requires careful reconsideration. William's silent approval and strategic positioning. While much of the attention surrounding this inheritance has focused on Lady Louise Windsor and the reaction from Queen Camilla's family, there is another presence in this story that cannot be ignored. It is quieter, less visible, but arguably far more influential. Because behind any significant shift within the royal family, especially one involving private estates and long-term positioning, there is almost always an alignment with the future direction of the monarchy, and that direction is increasingly shaped by Prince William. Unlike previous generations, William has made it clear, both through his actions and through those close to him, that he envisions a more streamlined and controlled royal structure, one that relies on a smaller group of trusted individuals rather than a broad network of loosely connected relatives. This approach is not accidental. It reflects lessons learned from decades of public scrutiny, internal challenges, and shifting expectations about what the monarchy should represent in the modern world. Where once the institution relied on a wider circle to maintain visibility and tradition, it now appears to be moving toward a model that prioritizes efficiency, discretion, and consistency. Within that framework, the decision to place a significant estate in the hands of Lady Louise begins to take on a different meaning, because Louise represents something that aligns almost perfectly with that vision. She is not a headline-driven royal. She does not attract controversy. She does not generate unnecessary attention. Instead, she operates with a quiet sense of responsibility, maintaining a presence that is steady rather than dramatic. For William, that kind of profile is not just preferable, it is essential. Some insiders suggest that while this inheritance may have originated as a personal decision linked to the late Queen Elizabeth II, it also fits seamlessly into the broader strategic direction that William is believed to support. Not through direct involvement, but through alignment. Because in the royal family, approval does not always come in the form of public endorsement. It is often reflected in what is allowed to stand, in what is not challenged, and in how decisions are quietly reinforced over time. And in this case, there has been no indication of resistance. That silence speaks volumes. It suggests that this move, rather than disrupting the future structure of the monarchy, may actually be reinforcing it. By placing the estate with Louise, the family ensures that it remains within a circle defined by trust and discretion. It avoids introducing new variables or potential complications. It keeps control within a network that is predictable, stable, and aligned with a long-term vision. And that is where the strategic aspect becomes clearer. Because this is not just about one estate. It is about establishing patterns that determine how decisions are made, how responsibilities are distributed, and how influence is managed moving forward. Once those patterns are set, they tend to repeat, shaping future choices in ways that may not be immediately visible, but become increasingly evident over time. For William, the goal appears to be clarity, a monarchy that operates with defined roles, clear boundaries, and a carefully managed distribution of influence. A system where key assets are entrusted to individuals who reflect the values he intends to carry forward. In that context, Lady Louise's position becomes more than symbolic. It becomes functional. She represents a model of what the future royal framework might prioritize. Not prominence, but dependability. Not visibility, but stability. Not expansion, but careful consolidation. And that model, if consistently applied, could reshape the internal dynamics of the royal family in ways that extend far beyond this single decision. Of course, strategic positioning rarely exists without consequence, because as one group becomes more central, another inevitably finds itself on the periphery, not through exclusion, but through a gradual shift in relevance, a subtle reordering of priorities that changes who is included in key moments and who is not. That is the reality now, beginning to take shape. While the public sees an inheritance, those within royal circles are recognizing something deeper, a quiet affirmation of direction, a reinforcement of a vision that has been forming steadily over time, and perhaps most importantly, a signal that the future of the monarchy will not simply follow tradition for tradition's sake. It will be shaped, carefully, intentionally, and with a clear sense of who is trusted to carry that future forward. In that sense, William's silence is not an absence of involvement. It is, in many ways, the clearest indication of approval, because in the royal family, the most powerful decisions are often the ones that require no words at all. The royal divide deepens. What began as a quiet and seemingly straightforward inheritance is now revealing something far more complex beneath the surface. Because within the royal family, change is rarely isolated. It does not simply affect one person or one decision. Instead, it moves outward, influencing relationships, expectations, and the delicate balance that has long defined how the monarchy operates behind closed doors. And in this case, that balance appears to be shifting. Oh, the decision to place a significant estate in the hands of Lady Louise Windsor has created a subtle but undeniable divide. Not one marked by public disagreement or visible conflict, but one that exists in perception, in alignment, and in the quiet reassessment of roles within the family. Because for some, this move represents stability. It signals a return to values that have long been associated with the strength of the monarchy: discretion, loyalty, and a measured approach to responsibility. It reinforces the idea that influence is not determined by visibility alone, but by trust and consistency over time. For others, however, the same decision raises concerns. It suggests that long-standing assumptions about access and inclusion may no longer hold. That proximity to the center of royal life is not guaranteed, even for those who once felt securely positioned within it. And that realization, even if not openly expressed, has the potential to reshape how certain members of the extended family view their place within the institution. At the heart of this divide is a question of direction. Is the monarchy moving toward a more concentrated structure, where influence is held by a smaller, more tightly controlled group? Or is this simply a single decision that happens to carry broader implications? For Prince William and those aligned with his vision, the answer may already be clear. A streamlined monarchy offers greater control, fewer complications, and a more consistent public image. It reduces the risk of internal tension spilling into the public sphere, and allows for a more focused approach to royal duties. But such a model inevitably creates distance. Those who are not part of that inner circle may find themselves gradually moving further from the center of influence. Not through exclusion, but through a natural narrowing of roles and responsibilities. Over time, that shift can feel significant, even if it is never formally acknowledged. And that is where the divide deepens, because the royal family has always relied on a balance between unity and individuality. Each member brings their own identity, their own relationships, and their own expectations. When that balance begins to change, even subtly, it can alter the entire dynamic of the institution. For Lady Louise, this new position places her at the intersection of that change. She becomes part of a smaller group, entrusted with greater responsibility, whether she actively seeks that role or not. Her presence within that circle reinforces the direction the monarchy appears to be taking, and for others, it serves as a reminder that the structure they once understood is evolving, quietly, gradually, but unmistakably. What this means for the future of the monarchy. As the implications of this inheritance continue to unfold, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. This moment is not just about property, it is about the future shape of the monarchy itself. The royal family is entering a period defined by careful decisions and long-term planning. The era of Queen Elizabeth II was marked by continuity and stability, a steady presence that guided the institution through decades of change. But the transition to a new generation brings with it a different set of priorities. Under King Charles III, and increasingly influenced by Prince William, the monarchy appears to be redefining itself, not dramatically, but deliberately. There is a growing emphasis on focus, on maintaining a smaller, more cohesive group of individuals who represent the institution, on ensuring that those entrusted with responsibility reflect a certain level of discretion, reliability, and alignment with the monarchy's evolving identity. Within that context, the rise of Lady Louise Windsor takes on a deeper meaning. She represents a shift toward a quieter form of influence, one that does not rely on constant public attention, but instead operates through trust and steady presence. Her inheritance of a private estate signals that the monarchy is placing value on those qualities as it looks ahead. But this approach also carries challenges. A more streamlined structure can strengthen the institution, but it can also create distance within the family. As roles become more defined and influence becomes more concentrated, the risk of division increases. Managing that balance will be one of the key tests for the monarchy in the years to come. Because the success of the institution has always depended not only on public perception, but also on internal cohesion. If the family can navigate these changes while maintaining a sense of unity, the monarchy may emerge stronger and more resilient. But if the shifts in influence lead to growing tension, the consequences could extend beyond private conversations and into the public sphere. For now, the decision to entrust this estate to Lady Louise stands as a clear signal, a signal that the monarchy is evolving, that the criteria for influence are changing, and that the future will be shaped not just by tradition, but by carefully chosen individuals who embody the direction the institution intends to follow. The question that remains is how those choices will continue to unfold. Because within the royal family, the most important transformations are rarely announced. They are revealed over time, one decision at a time. As the balance of power quietly finds its new form, the story is far from over. As quiet decisions continue to reshape the royal family, the true impact of this inheritance will unfold over time. What seems subtle today could redefine tomorrow. And behind palace walls, the next move may already be in motion, waiting to change everything once again.